Welcome to the BoomBastiCAST with Alexander Hawk and Mr. Matthew Fisher. And today we have a great episode for you. We are going to be interviewing Gary K. Wolf, the creator of Roger Rabbit.
Hell yeah.
Nothing
Super
cooler
excited.
than that, man. Nothing cooler than that.
You know, a great man, a great honor and a privilege to sit down with this guy, hear a whole bunch of stories, you know, about his come up and, you know, the gigantic explosion that was Roger Rabbit, you know what I mean? Myself and the Hawk over there, gigantically influenced. I still quote to this day, you know, cut the Bullschtick. Aren't you Eddie Valiant? I heard you change your name to Jack Daniels. What we got here, Hawk? I'm losing my mind here. I was gonna do the Harvey line.
Hey! I got a 50-year-old lust with a 3-year-old dinky. You know.
Remember me when I killed your brother? I talk just like this. Without further ado, welcome Gary K. Wolf to the BoomBastiCAST. Gary, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. You had the food poisoning.
He had the food poisoning.
You know, I had to laugh when you told me that because, well, in this day and age, when you say, "Oh my God, I'm sick," and then you say, "Oh, it's food poisoning," you say, "Oh, thank God," you know, thank God. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you 110%. It felt like the last seconds of COVID, actually.
Oh, I know. You know, I've been there, done that, and
Yeah.
the unfortunate thing is, you know, you can't really tell how you got it because it's not something that you ate like 2 hours earlier, or even maybe the day before. It could have been like 2 days ago.
Yeah. I forgot how much I hated that. Like how when you're that deep in the sickness, how much like death you feel. I forgot how much you feel that.
Oh boy! You guys had the COVID shot?
Not yet.
Not yet. No.
I got my first one actually 2 weeks ago. I got my second one on Wednesday, and they say that after the second one that you experience a day of complete and utter misery, but you know, better than having COVID, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of it in there, right?
Yeah.
You know what they do with the vaccine? There's a little bit in there.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, that's what they're saying. We'll see. I'll let you know.
Gary will keep us informed.
I'll put you on my my medical update to the rest.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Nice to be here. Actually, nice to be anywhere these days. So.
I hear that. Yeah. You know, we're gigantic fans, of course. Me and Alex, always talking about, of course, Roger Rabbit, of course, sitting right next to you.
Okay.
He watches me over my shoulder and corrects any character descriptions of him that he doesn't like. So
yeah,
I would rather have Jessica, but
that's what the other shoulder is for.
The good and bad angel.
Yeah.
Hello, Roger. How are you doing this evening? He's doing well. He's giving me the eye.
Yeah.
So as an author, you know what I mean? When did you really first get the vibe that, you know, writing was the thing that you really wanted to do?
Oh, well, I don't want to make myself seem precocious because I wasn't and I'm not. But it all started about the second grade. And in the second grade, my second grade teacher, and I first, let me tell you, I come from a small farm town in Illinois, 1,400 people, called Earlville. So my second grade teacher gave the class a picture to color, and the whole object of the exercise was to stay inside the lines. You know, that was it, stay inside the lines. So I took the picture home to color it. We could keep it overnight. And it was a picture of typical kind of a farm scene. I mean, there was a farmhouse, there was a barn, there was a field, there was a fence, and there was a cow out in the middle of the pasture, right? So I took that picture and I colored the farmhouse yellow, which was the color farmhouses were around Earlville. I colored the barn red because, you know, barns were red. Green grass, brown fence, and then I come to the cow. And my mother had always told me that when people were alone, they sometimes got sad, they got lonely, and they got blue. And I'm looking at this poor cow all alone out there in the middle of the field. The color of the cow blue, right? So the next day, but I stayed inside the lines. I mean, I was inside the lines. So the next day, I handed the picture back to my teacher, and the day after that, she passed them all out, all except for mine. And she said, Gary, she said, I want you to come up here to the front of the class. And I said, oh my God, I have stayed inside the lines better than anybody. So I went out up in front of the class. She said, all right, now face the class, turn and face the class. So I did. And she held that picture up over my head. And she said, class, she said, look at this stupid, stupid picture. She says, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white, cows are sometimes brown, black, and white all together. Never, never, never are cows blue. She says, Gary, don't you ever do anything that stupid again. So she called my mother. Now, you know, I mean, this was a big deal, not just for me, but for my mother. And my mother had to go to school. And the teacher said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. So that night, I was home and my folks called me in the living room, and my mother and my dad, and they sat me down and they said, Gary, why did you color that cow blue? And I said, Ma, it was you. It was all you. You told me that when people are alone, they get sad and lonely. They color, they get blue. So I'm looking at this lonely cow colored in blue. So my mother and father said, Gary, you go outside and play for a while. Your dad and I have to think about this. So I went outside, and you got to know my parents, wonderful, wonderful people. But my dad had to drop out of school in the 3rd grade to go to work during the Depression. My mother had to drop out of school in the 8th grade and to go to work during the Depression. These were not what you would call upscale, well-educated urban liberals. I mean, these were hardscrabble working folk. And I didn't think that this was going to have a happy ending for me. So finally, my mother yelled out, she says, Gary, come on back in here. She came back in, and she said, you know, Gary, your dad and I talked about this, and we decided that the next time you want to color a cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. And that was, by and large, no question about it, the best piece of advice I have ever gotten in my life. It also, I mean, I was only in the 2nd grade and I didn't know, but it also validated my creativity. And my mother called the teacher, and of course this was a big deal for her because the teacher was like a god to my mother. And she said, look, the next time Gary wants to do something like that, he's got our permission. You just let him go ahead. So a couple of weeks went by and we got another assignment. We were supposed to write what we did on our summer vacation. And all the kids wrote, well, gee, I went to Pittsticks Lake, and God, we went to Wisconsin, and I wrote this little 4-page story about how during my summer vacation, I went out in my backyard and built a rocket ship using tin cans and string and flew it to the moon. And the teacher just gave it back to me, didn't make a comment, and that was it. And that was essentially the start of my writing career. I've been writing ever since. And I mean, I've colored a lot of cows blue since then. When I went to university, I went to University of Illinois, and I went as an engineer of all things because that was the high status profession in Earlville. We had an electrical plant there, and electrical engineers were high status. And what we didn't have was a guidance counselor or a jobs counselor. I mean, I had no idea what there was to do in the world. I had no idea that somebody could make a living writing. It was inconceivable to me that anybody could do that. So I went to the University of Illinois as an engineer and spent the first semester there just completely and totally miserable. I mean, I had a slide rule that I wore strapped down to my hip, and I was spending, for every hour I spent in class, I had to spend 5 hours in a lab and another 3 hours in homework, and I was having no fun. Not that you're supposed to go to college and have fun, but I understand that for some people it's part of it.
Some people.
But I was having no fun, and the only class I really enjoyed was English, and that was the flunk out class. They at the University of Illinois in those days, they had to accept any graduate of an Illinois high school. They could not turn them away. No SATs or any of that. If you graduated from Illinois high school, you got into the University of Illinois. But they would flunk you out. And they used the English class mostly to flunk you out. So I was taking this English class, and the English instructor gave me an assignment to read the Odyssey and write a book report. And the whole class had to do it. And of course, that was a big flunk out. You know, read the Odyssey. Oh, Jesus, write a book report. Whoa. So I read the Odyssey, and instead of just writing a book report, I rewrote it as a piece of noir fiction, and I handed it in. And the next day, the instructor handed them all back but mine, right? I said, oh, here we go again.
Okay, yeah.
And she called me up, and she said, Gary, she said, I had to fail you on this because you did not write a book report, but your writing was so magnificent that I am just going to give you an A and proficiency you out of the class, and you don't have to come anymore. And that'll give you more time to concentrate on your engineering studies, which I needed at the time. And if I had been a smart guy back then, I would have said, hey, you know, maybe this is fate trying to tell me something. Maybe I ought to get engineering now. But that's kind of been my life. I've always written. I didn't start to publish until much later. I was writing poems to the young woman who eventually became my wife, and you know, she said, "Gee, you know, these are just wonderful." She said, "You know, you read a lot of science fiction. You should try writing science fiction." And so I said, well, yeah, sure, why not? So I tried writing science fiction, and I spent a year writing a story. It was 10 pages long, took me a year. And my wife said, oh, this is really good. So I sent it to a magazine, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And 6 months went by and I didn't hear anything. And I figured, well, you know, that's how writing works. I mean, it's in a trash can somewhere. It's so bad it's in a trash can somewhere. After 6 months, I get this telegram. The only telegram I've ever got in my life, Western Union, you know, telegram saying, we really loved your story and we'd like to buy it and we'll pay you $50. Oh, $50 for 10 pages, but a year's work, right? It's like 23 cents an hour if you. So I got $50 for that story, and again, that was a turning point for me because it validated me as a professional writer. I had made money on something that I had written. So I mean, I was as happy with that sale as I have ever been with any sale ever in my life. I was literally dancing on our dining room table. And so we were living in San Francisco at the time. And I said, you know, I'm now an official science fiction writer. I got to start dressing like a writer, right? So I went down to the Haight-Ashbury and I went down to Gough Street where some of the trendier boutiques were located. And I got myself a black turtleneck, which was very in those days. I got myself a tweed jacket with leather patches. I got myself a custom-made pair of leather pants, right? Which I could still fit in, except this being the 70s, they were bell bottoms, and the bottoms were about this big. And the whole outfit cost me $375. So I wound up on my first sale like 3 1/4 in the hole, right? And had it right fixed. But that's where it started, and it's gone on ever since.
Yeah, you got to enjoy life though. You got to get that $375.
You got to. You got, and now, I mean, and now look what I wear, right? I mean,
That's
pajama bottoms and a plaid shirt, right?
No, that's $475 right there. So, you know, how much do you think the business of writing has changed from the time you got into it back then to like any people trying to get into it now?
Oh, it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
You know, when I first started, there were all kinds of avenues for beginning writers to get into writing. You know, you had all of the science fiction magazines, scores of them. You had hardcover science fiction anthologies. I published a lot with Damon Knight and his Orbit series. A lot of my early stuff went to Damon Knight and the Orbit series, which were hardcover anthologies, which then went to paperback. There were mystery magazines. If you really wanted to branch out, there were true romance magazines. There were all kinds of ways for budding writers to get their stuff published. And there weren't a lot of, there weren't a lot of writers. And frankly, competition wasn't that stiff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of people that were writing, but not a lot of people that were writing well. I mean, there were not a lot of people writing anything that you'd want to read. As the years have progressed, two things have happened. The market has shrunk. You don't have, you don't have Playboy. You have Playboy, but it's not the market that it once was. And you don't have a lot of the science fiction magazines publishing anymore. You don't have a lot of the mystery magazines. You don't have the places that a beginning writer could go without a lot of street cred behind him and publish something. They won't publish somebody that they don't know. They'd rather publish Stephen King than, Joe Schmo down the street. Right. So that's one thing. The second thing is the competition's gotten a lot better. I mean, people who write today, even people who start out, who are rank amateurs, are a lot better than people who were rank amateurs back when I was starting. I mean, the level that I was at back then, I would be at the bottom of the heap today because people have just gotten better. There are more writing classes. Writing is more accepted as an honorable profession. When you were a writer back in my day, it was kind of sleazy. Oh geez, you were what do you write, like pornography? No. I write about talking rabbits. Oh well, that's just maybe one step above pornography, but it's harder today. It used to be easy to get a book published. You wrote the book, you sent it around to, and you could do it yourself. You sent it around to editors at various publishers, and sooner or later, it'd get published. I had an instructor in college once who said anything that is written by man under the sun today gets published, but that's not true anymore. The market is so competitive. It now costs so much to publish a novel, and the publishers who publish novels want proven commodities. I mean, they want to publish John Grisham. They don't want to publish some unknown from down the street, even though he's 10 times as good. Yeah. And they all want merchandise tie-ins. They don't just want a good story. They want a good story with some characters that they can sell to the movies and make a movie out of it and make dolls from. So it's a much tougher profession than it used to be. Yeah.
To go back to that teacher thing though, I feel like it's probably got a little more loose on the stifling, the small town mentality of no, you can never make it. You know what I mean?
Well,
yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Small town mentality. Like I told you, I grew up in Earlville, Illinois, 1,400 people. And, you would think that I'm the most famous person to come out of Roeville, Illinois, but my my best friend from whenever, he became a priest. His name was John Myers. He became a priest, and eventually became a bishop. He became the Bishop of Peoria, and eventually became an archbishop, which is pretty high up in the church. He was the Archbishop of New Jersey, and yeah, he was the guy. I say we were friends forever. He was the guy who introduced me to science fiction, and that happened in the 7th grade. We were both voracious readers. I mean, I read like adventure stories, Robin Hood and King Arthur and Treasure Island. And he read, even then, he read biographies and histories and really boring stuff. But we both, now, I'm not saying, kids, it's not boring. And don't do drugs, all right? So, so he came, we both love science. And so he came to me one day with this book, and it was called Space Hawk. And he said, I've got to, I read this book, Space Hawk. I found it at the library. He said, it's science, but it's fiction. It's science fiction. And we had never heard of this. So he had read it and loved it. And he said, you got to read it. So I read it and I loved it. And it was just incredible. I mean, incredible. It changed my life. Without having read Space Hawk, there would have been no Roger Rabbit. No. So we went to the town librarian and said, can you get us more of this science fiction? She said, yeah, I can do that. So she got us the giants. She got us Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and all the biggies, and we just loved it. And we both got hooked on science fiction. I mean, I started writing it. John continued to read it. John could quote you chapter and verse of any Star Trek episode ever filmed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, about 15 years ago, for a Christmas present, I said, I'm gonna hunt up 2 copies of Space Hawk, and I'm gonna give one to John and keep one for myself. We're gonna reread it and relive our youth, right? So I did that. I had to find 2 copies of some used book dealer. Give one to John, one to me, and I read it. It's the worst damn book you've ever read. It was horrible. There was nothing good about it. It was trite. It was badly written. The hero, Hawk Kars, was this cardboard yahoo who wasn't even as good as Buck Rogers. It was semi-racist. He had a black kind of Stepin Fetchit guy who was his right-hand man, who we call Friday, and the villain was a guy he called a slanty-eyed nip, and it was just nothing good about this book. And I thought to myself, this is the book that started me on my career. Without this book, there would have been no Roger Rabbit. So I called John and I said, John, did you read that book? Did you read Space Hawk? And he said, yeah, I did. I said, what'd you think? He said, wasn't very good. I said, yeah, you can say that again. And so one of us, we argued over which one said it, but one of us said, it's a shame we can't rewrite it the way we remember it instead of the way it actually was. And once we got that idea, we pursued it, and we started writing a book called Space Vulture, which is like one bigger bird than Space Hawk. And we originally were just gonna get the rights to Space Hawk and get rid of all the trash and modernize the story, but there was nothing salvageable about it. I mean, there was just nothing good about it. So we started fresh. We used some of the characters' names, but we wrote a whole new story, a whole new book, and Tor published it. And it was just wildly successful in science fiction circles. The New York Times ran an article on the 10 best pulp science fiction novels. And there was Asimov and Heinlein and Bradbury and us. and 10 best pulp science fiction novels. Yeah, and we were designated a sci-fi essential, which is a book that any science fiction lover has to have in their library. The reviews on it were stunning. But what was really pleasant and enjoyable for us, we were getting letters from guys our age who said, you know, I didn't think anybody would ever write a book like this again. And thank you guys for doing it. And then we started getting letters from guys our age who said, you know, I read it and loved it so much, I gave it to my son or my daughter. And one of them I remember, guy said in the letter, you know, my son was reading in the next room and I kept hearing, oh man, this is great. Oh man, this is wonderful. And so we went into a whole new generation. And that was really satisfying. We had a lot of fun doing it.
When you first started to break, did you guys ever get a chance to meet any authors that you really looked up to, like that you were fans of, that, you know, were fans back, or just got a chance to actually be like, blow your mind that you met this other person, this other writer?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
But two things, and you know, I talk to young writers about this all the time. I mean, you're going to meet people that are very famous, who are more famous than you, who you have idolized your whole life, and you're going to meet them, and one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to be wonderful people, or they're going to be total disappointments. And you never know how it's going to go. I mean, I have met writers who, as a kid, I idolized. I mean, writers whose work I have read. I've read their entire output, and I've met them in person, and they were just complete buttheads. And it is a problem for me because I can't separate the artist from the work.
Right.
So, you know, if I want to continue to read some of the writers that I've loved, I have learned you can't meet them.
Yeah, I've heard
cannot
that.
meet them. You know, but there are others like Harlan Ellison. Harlan Ellison was one of my early friends, one of my mentors, and you know, meeting Harlan Ellison did not in the least alter how I felt about his work. I mean, he was a little cocky little guy, and you know, loved going into bars and picking fights with people twice his size.
He's like Alex over here.
Hey,
Yeah. You know, others not so much. And I've gotten letters from famous writers who have said, yeah, you know, I really like your work. You know, let's get together, have a beer sometime. I generally would rather hang around with fans because fans don't disappoint me as often. It's a slippery slope. It's the same when I started writing movies, and I started meeting actors and actresses, and some of them, Bob Hoskins, oh my God.
Love him.
The guy was unbelievable, just a real down-to-earth, fun-loving guy. I mean, the kind of guy you just hang around with the guy, you go for a beer, you do shots. I mean, he's just a great guy, no ego.
Yeah.
But you meet others, unfortunately, most of the others who are just big babies, and they are great actors, and by actors I'm including men and women. They are great actors because they don't have any internal kind of superstructure. They're good at pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And they're good at doing what they're told to do. And sometimes that doesn't stand you very well in the real world,
Right.
where you don't have a personality. You know, so it happened to me an awful lot when I started meeting actors and directors. But you know, it happens when you meet people too. I mean, you meet a normal person, and you know, sometimes you say, "Geez, this person ought to lock himself in a closet and stay there for the rest of his life."
Yeah, we go to a lot of conventions and stuff like that and have the shows. So like we you know, we always say, you know, sometimes you might catch somebody on a bad day. You never know where they're coming from. They could have got a bad call, blah, you know, the whole deal. But yeah,
you know, you go to a lot of conventions, and how often do you go up to somebody for an autograph? And the person is nice to you, engages you, calls you by name. You say, "Hey, can I take a picture?" They say, "Sure, come on back." You know, and you go away saying, "That was a great person." How many times you go to a convention and there's some guy sitting at the table, doesn't even look up. You say, "Hey, would you personalize that to Matthew?" He says, "No, I don't do that." You know, I mean,
that's an extra $50.
That's yeah, exactly. And you know, I was just talking to somebody the other day about because I get, oh my God, 1,000 letters and emails a month from fans, and I answer them all personally. And somebody wrote and said, "You know, I really appreciate the fact that you answered my letter." And I wrote back, and I actually posted it on my Facebook page. I said, "Well, you got Jack Brickhouse to thank for that." And they said, "Jack Brickhouse, who's that?" I said, "Well, when I was a kid back in Earlville, right, I was a Chicago Cubs fan. Jack Brickhouse was the voice of the Chicago Cubs. He did the radio commentary for the Chicago Cubs." And my mother, good woman, my mother found out that Jack Brickhouse's birthday was the same day as mine. And so I was like 7 years old. And my mother said, "You should send," because I used to listen to him all the time and I thought it was great. And my mother said, "You should send him a birthday card and put a white handkerchief in it as a birthday present." Now, why she thought a white handkerchief was a good birthday present for a sportscaster, I don't know. But I did. I got a white handkerchief, put it in the birthday card, and I said, "Happy birthday, Jack. Your birthday is the same day as mine." And I sent it to Jack Brickhouse. And he wrote me back, wrote me the nicest letter. And I pinned it up in my room. And the next year, I sent him another birthday card with another white handkerchief. And he wrote me again and said, "Oh, you know, now I've got 2 white handkerchiefs from you." And I did that for 5 years. And every year, he wrote me back. And I told my mother, I said, "You know, Ma, if I ever get famous enough so that people write me letters, I'm always going to write them back." So, you know, my fans have Jack Brickhouse to thank for that.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack. And you know, if you want to send me a white handkerchief, I don't know, surrender, surrender. I don't know.
Gary's gonna build a big quilt out of all the white handkerchiefs.
Yeah. Quilta Blanco. Yeah.
I like that. I love hearing those stories and you paying it forward, because you do. When you go to these cons, sometimes you meet these people that are like, the only time they look at you is like to eyeball you to see if they need to ask for more money. You know what I mean? And that's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
it's things like that. I mean, the whole thing is, you know, when you get to that position, you gotta give back to the fans. You gotta, you know, connect with them. I think that's a big thing in this kind of stuff.
absolutely. You know, without my fans, where would I be? I would be an unknown hack writer, writing advertising copy for breakfast cereal. I mean, what really galls me are some of the actors, because without the fans, where would they be? You know, these people are spending now $10 and $12 for a movie ticket to go see them on the screen. The least they can do is you know, be pleasant. Be pleasant when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, you know, can I have your autograph?" Now, I know that there's abuse, and I know fans, you know, don't come up to your favorite actor when he's having dinner in a fine restaurant with his family. I mean, it's rude. But you know, I mean, at a show, even sometimes on the sidewalk, I think actors owe it to the fans to be pleasant and to have an engagement with them. And if they want an autograph, sure, great. It doesn't take you 2 seconds out of your life.
Yeah. And you might be making their whole week, whole year, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. You know, absolutely. I mean, I have signed autographs for people who have framed them, who have said that was the high point of their life. You know, and that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good. I enjoy doing things that make other people feel good.
Yeah. Good man. I like that. Your partner's giving me the eyeball. Let's ask real quick. When did you and Roger first start crossing paths back then?
Oh, okay. So, so I was a pretty well-known science fiction writer in San Francisco, and I had a contract with Doubleday for 1, 2, 3. Let's see, Killer Bull, for 4 novels. I had a contract with Doubleday for 4 novels. Anything I wanted to write, I would publish. And the first one I wrote was Killer Bull, which is still my favorite non-Roger Rabbit science fiction novel, and the one for which I'm best known when I go to a science fiction conference. I'm not known as the guy that created Roger Rabbit. I'm known as the guy that wrote Killer Bull, because it's an incredible science fiction novel.
And there's a film coming on that, right, I believe?
Yeah. We're doing a movie on it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I did Killer Bull. I did Generation Removed. I did A Resurrectionist. And for the 4th novel, I wanted to do something that was outside the envelope. I wanted to stretch the boundaries, do something that had never been done before. So when I was a kid, again, my mother, I'm a big mama's boy, you know. She's the only one that reads my work anyways. But my mother told me, you know, my father ran the pool hall, and my mother worked in a cafeteria. And she said, you know, if you want to get out of this town and you don't want to wind up running your dad's pool hall, the thing that you can do to make that happen is to read. You know, just read. That will get you out of here. But good mother that she was, she never put any restrictions on what I could read. So what did I read? Well, I read what kids read. I read comic books. You know, I'd go down to Andy Giles' B Street Smoke Shop on Tuesdays when the new comic books came in, and I'd read all I could before he threw me out. And, you know, then I'd buy the rest with my allowance, and I'd trade with other kids, and I read them all. And my dad, who was not a big reader, but he did read what they called in those days true crime magazines. And if you ever saw the movie with Tom Hanks, Road to Perdition,
Okay.
Jude Law plays a photographer who goes to crime scenes and takes pictures of real murders and, you know, real horrific crime scenes, and then sells them to magazines. And those were real magazines, and those were real crime scene pictures. And my dad read those. And again, you know, so there were tons of them lying around the house. And again, my mother had never cared. I read horrific true crime magazines. So luckily, I transitioned into a better quality of crime fiction, you know, Dashiell Hammett and Ross MacDonald and Mickey Spillane and, you know, hard-boiled private eye stuff. But my 2 loves were comic books, cartoons, and comic strips, and noir mysteries. So I thought, well, you know, I'm going to see if I can find a way to combine those 2 concepts, you know, cartoons and noir mysteries. And so I'm thinking, you know, how can I do that? So I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning, you know, for research. I told my wife, just purely for research. And now the cartoons were pretty simplistic and pretty badly drawn, but I became fascinated with the commercials because you had Tony the Tiger and the Trix Rabbit and Snap, Crackle, and Pop and Captain Crunch, who were cartoon characters talking to real children, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I thought, wow, what would happen if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? What kind of a world would that be? And that's what started it. So I started researching cartoons to see what cartoons did and what comic strips did that wasn't possible in a human world. And I spent a year doing the research, and then came up with Roger, Jessica, my finest creation, Eddie Valiant, my version of Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe. I named him Eddie after my father, and came up with a story. And it was a story that could not exist anywhere except in a world where cartoon characters were real. And that book was Who Censored Roger Rabbit? So, like I say, I had a contract with Doubleday. They would publish anything that I wrote. So I sent them the book, sent it to my editor, and she rejected it. The first reject I'd ever had as a writer. Never had a reject. And they rejected Roger Rabbit. So I called my editor and I said, Sharon, why did you reject this? She said, this is the best thing I've ever written. I mean, she said, I agree. She said, it's funny, it's innovative, but it's so unusual and so different from anything you've ever written, so different from anything anybody's ever written, that I had to send it to the marketing department. And they were the ones who rejected it. So I called the marketing department at Doubleday, and I said, why did you guys reject this? And they said, well, there's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. I can't sell this book. It's not a regular mystery. It's not a traditional fantasy. It's not a children's book. It's not a traditional adult novel. There's no category. I can't sell this book. And I said, well, what would you do if somebody brought you Gulliver's Travels, The Wizard of Oz, or Alice in Wonderland? What would you do with those? And the guy thought for a minute and says, I couldn't sell those either. So I called my agent and I said, Bill, what do we do? He says, oh, we'll find a home for this. Don't worry. I said, well, because if we don't find a home for this, if I can't publish this, I don't want to be a writer, because this is what I want to write. And if I can't publish that, I don't want to be a writer anymore. He said, no, don't worry. So he started sending it out to different publishers, different editors, the same publisher. Along the way, it got 110 rejects. 110 different editors said no. And they all said no for the same reason. They all loved it, but when they sent it to the marketing department says, we can't publish it. There's no market. So it finally wound up on the desk of a young woman at St. Martin's Press. Her name was Rebecca Martin, and she had just published a big bestseller for it. So the president of St. Martin's gave her a vanity project. He said, all right, you can pick a book, any book you want, and we'll publish it. It'll be your little vanity project. And just at that moment, my book came across her desk, and she read it. And she said, wow, this is it. So she took it to the head of the publishing department, the president of the company. And she said, this is the book I want to publish. And he said, all right, I'll take it home. I'm going to read it. And I'll get back to you in the morning. So he took it home, read it, came back the next day. Said, well, Rebecca, I told you that you could publish anything you wanted, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. So Rebecca stood up to the plate and said, look, you told me I could publish anything I wanted. Either publish it or I quit. And so they published it, albeit in very, very small quantities. They had 5,000 copies, which is next to nothing. And if I had my life to live over, right? If I could go back in time and relive my life, knowing what I know today, I would go back and I would buy all 5,000 of those copies, because I think they sold for $2.99, right?
Yeah.
And today, if you look on eBay, they're going for $375. So it would be a very wealthy. But you know, I sold it to him, and um, I sold it to him in 1980. It came out in 1981. Oh my God, 40 years ago this year. Well, came out in 1981. And in that interim between 1980 and 1981, I got this phone call at home, right? And I answered the phone, and the guy on the other end says, "It's Gary K. Wolf." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, this is Roy Disney from the Disney Corporation." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, Roy Disney called me at home, right? That's going to happen." He says, "No, really, Roy Disney." And I was convinced it was one of my friends having me off, you know. And
Yeah.
he said, "No, Roy Disney, I read your book, and I want to know if you'd be interested in having the Walt Disney Company make a movie of your book." And I said, "Yeah, right. The book hasn't even come out yet. You know, yeah, you're fooling with me." He said, "No. And it turned out that somebody in St. Martin's had sent the Disney Company a manuscript with a note saying, 'We think you'd like this book,' and made its way up to Roy Disney, and it turned out he did like it very much. And I have tried to find out who sent that manuscript to Disney, because I wanted to kiss her or him full on the lips. I have never been able to find out who did that. But anyway, they said, "Yeah, you know, we want to make this into a movie." And if you read the book, and everybody should read the book, you know, I didn't think it was filmable. I didn't think there was any way that they could make a movie out of the book. I just didn't see it. But they gave me more money than I had made for everything I had written previously put together, and I'm more than willing to let them try. And for the first couple of years, they pretty much proved me right. They just couldn't get it together. They didn't have the technology. Finally, Roy Disney came to me and said, "Look," he said, "instead of doing it as a live action animated movie, what would you think about us doing it as a movie with the cartoon characters in costume like they are at Disneyland?" And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, geez, I'm going to wind up with a movie with Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant, Haley Mills as Jessica, you know, Dean Jones as the rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman," right? I said, "You know, don't you think that violates the concept just a little bit?" And of course, everybody agreed, and they went back, and they, then in 1985, a couple of things happened. Roy Disney got forced out and got replaced by Michael Eisner. And Mike Eisner brought in Jeff Katzenberg, who had been working with him at 20th Century, I think. And they threw out every project that was under development, because that's what new management always does, except for Roger Rabbit. They kept that because they needed that one. They were in danger of becoming a second-rate movie production company, and they needed a big splash. They had been offered E.T. and turned it down. They'd been offered Star Wars and turned it down. They needed something big, and they needed something splashy, and this was it. So they brought in a little-known guy to produce, which nobody at Disney had ever done before. They'd never brought in an outside producer. But this little-known guy that they'd worked with before was Steven Spielberg. And, you know, once Steven Spielberg gets involved, things immediately start to happen. As an example, in 1981 or 82, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers and said, "You know, we're making this live action animated movie, and we'd like to have Bugs Bunny do a cameo. He'll walk out, he'll say, 'What's up, Doc?' And walk off the screen." And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and said, "Get lost. You know, no way is Bugs Bunny ever going to appear in a Walt Disney picture. That will never happen." So 5, 6, 7 years later, Steve Spielberg goes to Warner Brothers and makes the identical request. "Can I have Bugs Bunny for a cameo?" And Warner Brothers says, of course, take them. Well, what about Porky Pig? Or what about Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? Well, you know, take them all. Yosemite Sam, God, get rid of them. And so he got them all for ridiculously reasonable licensing fee. I mean, almost next to nothing. But the one requirement, Bugs Bunny being a superstar, a co-equal superstar to Mickey Mouse, Bugs had a contract. And in Bugs' contract, Bugs had to be in every scene with Mickey. You could not have Mickey in a scene without Bugs. The two had to be in a scene together.
Yeah.
And they also had to have the exact same number of words of dialogue. So you can go through the movie and you can see that
Big ego. Big egos.
Big egos of the film business. The other interesting thing, and I just found this out, Warner Brothers wanted to use the modern versions of the characters, which are considerably different from the 1940s version. And the Disney animators were adamant about wanting to use the correct 1940s versions of the characters. And it turned out to be a good decision, because when the movie came out, Warner Brothers started making dolls with both the older version and the new version, and they kind of doubled their merchandise, but at the time they couldn't see it. So they wanted to use the modern version. So the animators had to show them dailies about, you know, how their characters were being portrayed. So the animator who was responsible for the Warner Brothers characters did 2 sets. He did a set with the original 1940s characters and a set with the modern characters. And then he showed Warner Brothers the set with the modern characters and Disney the set with the older characters. And of course, the older characters went in the movie, and Warner Brothers didn't know it until the movie came out. They complained to Disney and the guy got fired. But yeah, it turned out to be a good decision for Warner Brothers. One other kind of interesting Mickey Bugs thing, the animators weren't really happy with the way Warner Brothers kept saying, hey, you know, we want control over this. We want to see everything, even use the modern characters. They were really not happy with that. So in the scene where Bugs and Mickey are parachuting down, okay, they decided that in 6 cells. Now there's something called gags in the margins. Film goes through a projector at 24 frames a second, and you can pretty much fool around with 6 of those frames, and the human eye can't see it. So the animators have been doing this for years. They put little drawings in 6 cells, and they do it just to amuse themselves, and they know it's there, but nobody else does. So in the Bugs Mickey scene, as they're coming down, they intended for Mickey to give Bugs the finger, okay? So they passed this along to one of the animators, and the animators, Disney set up a studio in London with a bunch of expatriate animators from a lot of East Bloc countries. There were Russians, there were all kinds of Spanish, and it was a real Tower of Babel. I mean, if you wanted to speak to one guy who was from the Ukraine, you sometimes had to speak to the guy from Spain, who spoke to the guy from Italy, who spoke to the guy from Russia, who spoke to the guy from Ukraine, and they all came back around. So they told this guy to do this scene with, you know, Mickey giving Bugs the finger, and he got it wrong. And so if you look at that scene and you freeze frame it, you will see clearly that it is Bugs giving Mickey the finger. It was the entire wrong concept. But anyway, the movie went on to become a roaring success. Most successful movie of 1988, won 4 Academy Awards, grossed $750 million, the biggest grossing movie of the year. And they had the premiere at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. And of course I went. It was up in the VIP section, which was the first balcony. And I was going to see my movie on the screen for the first time. And they were still working on it up to a week before it premiered, because they just didn't want to turn it loose. They were having so much fun with it. And I was going to see my credit on the screen for the first time, which I'd never seen, because they added that at the very last minute. All of them at the very last minute. And I was sitting in the VIP section with Kathleen Turner sitting here, the voice of Jessica, and one of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life. Yeah. And Amy Irving sitting here, the second most beautiful woman I've ever met in my life, who was the singing voice of Jessica Rabbit. And I'm thinking to myself, life just doesn't get any better than this. And then by God, life got better, because Kathleen put her hand on my leg and leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Gary, are you excited?" And I said, "Kathleen, you have no idea."
I remember you said at one point they were thinking about going with like costume cartoon characters. At what point did that switch over from that idea to the live action animation? Was that with Spielberg or was Zemeckis?
Oh yeah, it was way before that. It was okay. Originally it was a roller coaster from 1980 until 1985. It kind of came and it went. They did all kinds of different animation tests. They brought in all kinds of different voice actors. Pee Wee Herman came in for a while and was going to do the Roger Rabbit voice. And they didn't have the technology to do a good live action animated movie. And at that point, somebody came up with, hey, let's do it with costumes. That really didn't last long, because that was, Howard the Duck, and that just didn't work. So, it wasn't like a hard and fast thing. I don't even think they did any screen tests. It was just a concept that somebody threw out. No, it wasn't until Steve Spielberg got involved. He brought in Bob Zemeckis, and both of them had read the novel when it first came out in 1981, both of them. And they both thought it would make a great movie. Disney had approached Bob Z about directing it back in 1981, but he didn't think that Disney had the horsepower to do it in 1981. So, he went off and did some other little known movies, Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, a bunch of other trash before finally.
Not as good as Roger,
Finally, Steve Spielberg came back to him and said, hey, now we've got the horsepower. What do you think? And so he came back in. Yeah.
Where did Judge Doom come from? He's such a crazy character.
Yeah, like I say, if you read the book is different from the movie. And people always say, well, what do you think? That, the book is different from the movie. But the book's a book and the movie's a movie. And I wrote the book to be the best possible book I was capable of writing. And the book appeals to a reader's imagination. You read it and you see it in your head. The movie puts it all out there on screen. And one of my favorite concepts from the book, these are cartoon characters from comic strips and comic books, and they speak in word balloons. So when you talk to them, they put up a word balloon and you read what they say. And if they turn around, then the word balloon turns around and you got to, go behind them or learn to read in reverse. And, if somebody gets shot with a tuned gun, the gun produces a bang balloon. And, if you then find another bang balloon, you can match the two bang balloons and see if they came from the same gun. It was just a concept for me, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
But couldn't, it didn't work as a movie. They tried early on because they loved the word balloons, but every time you put up a word balloon in a movie, it makes it a silent movie. You got to read a word balloon, and then and so that was pretty quick to go. But they wanted to do an homage to me and my word balloon. So there was a scene, Marvin Acme's funeral. And in the funeral scene, tunes are carrying his coffin. And the tunes, being tunes, start laughing and giggling. And pretty soon, all the tunes are laughing and giggling at this funeral, all except for Felix the cat. It's one of the pallbearers. And as he's walking along, he was a silent character. He never spoke in any of his cartoons or in any of his comic strips. So as he's walking along, Felix the cat puts up a word balloon that says sob, and it turns to tears and comes down and wets his shoulder, and it's a beautiful scene. But the movie ran, I don't know, an hour and 50 minutes in the original cut. And the rule of thumb was that a children's movie has to be no longer than 90 minutes. And nobody knew if this was going to be a children's movie or an adult movie. They didn't know who was going to go to see this. So they cut scenes to bring it closer to 90 minutes. I think they brought it down to maybe an hour and 40, something like that. But the coffin scene had to go. And also the scene where Eddie Valiant goes into Toontown the first time and confronts Judge Doom, and Jessica's there, and he suspects that Jessica is working with Judge Doom. That whole scene got cut too. And you can kind of tell that there's something missing, because you see Eddie Valiant after he gets pigged, after he comes back with a pig's head on his head, and he goes into his bathroom and washes the pig head off. But in the movie, Eddie Valiant comes out of his bathroom wearing his t-shirt, his sleeveless, his wife beater t-shirt, and a tie. He comes out of his bathroom, and Jessica is there. And if you think about it, what is a guy doing in his bathroom wearing, a sleeveless t-shirt and a tie? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But if you saw the stuff that was cut out, it makes perfect sense. But Judge Doom, we needed a villain, and it had to be a villain that could not exist in a human world, but that made sense in a toon world. Yeah. And I've played around a lot in my sequel novels, in Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, where we standardized on the 4-piece stutter, and I played around a lot with toons becoming humans and humans becoming toons, and in the Who Whacked Roger Rabbit. So we wanted a human who looked human but was actually a toon, and worked really well. Worked with the concept, frightening. The scene with Doom and his eyes. The two things that people tell me that really either frightened them or kind of horrified them about the movie. Doom with his eyes. I mean, I have given small children nightmares that will be revealed on psychiatrist couches for the next 30 years.
I was one of those kids.
Yeah, exactly right. So and the other one is the red shoe. When Doom dipped the red shoe. I mean, there are red shoe societies. I have vowed in letters and emails to the Red Shoe Society that when we do a sequel, I will resurrect the red shoe right there. That will bring back the red shoe. I promise I bring back the red shoe. Yeah.
Will there ever be a sequel, you think? Film-wise?
I'll tell you what I tell everybody else. Stay tuned. The movie at last accounting made more than it's way over $1 billion now, and it's given rise to Disney Toontown theme parks at Disneyland, Tokyo Disneyland. It's made a lot of money for a lot of people, and in Hollywood, that's generally the gating factor. And sooner or later, my belief is that things will come together, and we will see a sequel.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, it's so marketable, and it's one of those things. Every generation of kids
Yeah.
You know, would love Roger Rabbit type deal for sure.
Yeah, I see movie lists of movies that people would love to see sequels made, and the two that used to be at the top of the list were Pretty Woman and Roger Rabbit. People wanted to see that. Pretty Woman is pretty much fallen off the list, but Roger Rabbit is still number one. I mean, it is still number one movie that people would love to see a sequel made.
It was incredibly groundbreaking for its time. It'd be crazy to see what they could do with the technology now. With it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. All right, well, guys, I gotta go. So
yeah, Gary, we thank you very much for being on the show. You were a great guest. We'd love to have you again. I know you're a local man. Maybe we'll get together sometime. That would be fantastic.
My pleasure. Hey, so shameless plug.
Yes.
Go to my website, www.garywolf.com, and you will learn about all things Wolfian, and you will be able to buy my books and read them, which everybody should do. I mean, I should be a requirement. All right.
For sure. Yeah, everybody definitely go support Gary. Gary, thank you very much, man. Thank you very much.
I gotta tell you guys, this was one of the best interviews I've ever had because you didn't ask me any of the usual questions. I mean, I had a good time, and that's always important for me. And you were great interviewers, and I will do your show anytime.
We really appreciate that. We really try to make it a cool experience for the people involved and the fans, you know?
Yeah, I'm telling you, and I very rarely get questions that I haven't asked a million times, but you guys asked me 3 dozen, and I appreciate it. All right.
We appreciate you. Thank you, sir. All right, have a good one.
All right, take care. Bye.